but it's streamlined and it's legal. And perhaps more importantly, it's at the behest of the profit motive. When those three things are combined, most people, even if they feel it in their hearts that it's like no different than fucking murder, they don't necessarily have the same analysis.
Holy, that is so crazy.
But yeah, this that leads to tens of thousands of people dying. Just so you know, all of this leads to tens of thousands of people dying every year. Now, the problem is this kind of death is handled by so many people, so many hands touch it. And not only that, but it's streamlined and it's legal. And perhaps more importantly, it's at the behest of the profit motive. When those three things are combined, most people, even if they feel it in their hearts that it's like no different than fucking murder, they don't necessarily have the same analysis. That's why you don't think of this guy as like a ruthless warlord who's individually, killing children and babies, even though his actions are directly responsible for it. And yes, very famously, Champagne socialist Frederick Engels, gay lover of Karl Marx, second Engels mentioned in 24 hours is crazy. He called this concept social murder, the unnatural death that occurs due to social, political, or economic oppression. He coined this in the 1845 work, The Condition of the Working Class in England, whereby the class which at present holds social and political control, i.e. the bourgeoisie, places hundreds of proletarians in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and unnatural death. This was in a different category to murder and manslaughter committed by individuals against one another, as social murder explicitly was committed by the political and social elite against the poorest in society. And social murder is invisible in many ways. It's very visible when it happens to a loved one, but the way that society is designed, especially under capitalism, the system is designed so that you don't really realize who's doing this. Okay? Let's read the full quote. When one individual inflicts bodily injury upon another such that death results, we call that deed manslaughter. When the assailant knew in advance that the injury would be fatal, we call his deed murder. But when society places hundreds of proletarians in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and unnatural death, one which is quite as much a death by violence as that by the sword or bullet, falling into a chimney. I think they had chimney sweeps back then. Like little kids would fucking die when they were doing chimney sweep shit. That kind of stuff. Or maybe when your healthcare coverage is denied and then you die, or you kill yourself because you can't take on the 60 grand in medical debt, or you choose not to get the proper medical attention because you can't pay for it. That sort of stuff. That's what factors into the social death. But yes, when a worker is in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and unnatural death, one which is quite as much a death by violence as by sword or a bullet, when it deprives thousands of the necessities of life, places them under the conditions in which they cannot live, forces them through the strong arm of the law to remain in such conditions until that death ensues, which is the inevitable consequence, knows that these thousands of victims must perish and yet permits these conditions to remain, its deed is murder, just as surely as the deed of a single individual, disguised, malicious murder against which none can defend himself, which does not seem what it is, because no man sees the murderer, because the death of the victim seems a natural one, since the offense is more one of omission than of commission, but murder it remains. And that's precisely what this is. This dichotomy exists within state violence as well. State retains a monopoly of violence, and therefore when the state engages in very violent ways, it is not considered violence. But when an individual fights back against the state, then it's violence. That's why when police use tear gas on unsuspecting protesters, it's not considered to be a violent act. That's why newspapers say violence broke out when protesters kicked back the tear gas canisters in the direction of the police. So that's what it is. That's what exactly this is, right? So that's what happened here. And I think a lot of people, even if they don't fully understand that this person is responsible for a lot of death and destruction, I think that they are getting there. Does that make sense? I think people are recognizing they're angry, and they're recognizing a little bit why they're angry. That's all I'm saying. You know?
God damn, dude. Holy shit.